Right. First session after lunch. So the Centennial is a unique opportunity to bring together all 5 deans. Now, it's not often that a student gets to cold call the professor, let alone the dean, let alone all 5. So jokes aside, and this is at the risk of dating myself a little bit, but I've overlapped with each of the deans, either as a student, as an alum, as a member of the advisory council, or now as the trustee. And the GSB holds an incredibly special place in my life. Front row here is my wife, Hoyfen. We met here at the GSB. We're classmates celebrating our 25th reunion. Coming to the GSB brought us to Silicon Valley, and being at the GSB gave us the skills and the confidence and the community to be able to launch our careers. And we are incredibly grateful for this institution and everything it represents, and we feel an incredible obligation to pay it forward to the next generation, to give them the kind of opportunities and resources that we benefited from. So this is an amazing place. So as we celebrate 100 years, we have an opportunity to look to the past and to look to the future. And so we have this opportunity to get a perspective from the deans that have shaped the school for the last 35 years, and the dean that is leading us into the GSB's second century. Now at Sequoia, we have this concept we call crucible moments. These are inflection points, really important moments where a career or a company can really be defined. And as I was preparing for this panel, I was really curious to hear some of the crucible moments that the deans have faced. Moments that have had a bearing on making this place what it is today, and helping us understand why this place is consistently the best business school in the world. So I'm going to start with you, Dean Spence. I was fortunate to be at the GSB as you were concluding your tenure. Now, people forget that the Bay Area was actually struggling in the early 1990s, and it wasn't really until the advent of the internet that things really started to blossom here. What is a crucible moment that you faced during your tenure, and how did you navigate it?
You know, I thought about this when you told me you were going to ask me that, but I'd like that when there were some horrifying moments, like when the backup system didn't work and we lost all those PhD theses and it was a disaster. I thought I wasn't going to make it to the end of the term. But no, you need an ancient history component to a panel like this, and I'm it. So I decided to answer your question by asking, what do I remember? You know, that, well, I'm 82, right? And you tend to remember rewarding things. So when I came to the school, the group of people that created the foundations of this great institution were still here. So everybody knows about Ernie Arbuckle and R.J. Miller, but there were others. One of them sitting here, George Parker. But it was Lee Bach and Jim Van Horn, Chuck Holloway, Chuck Holmgren, and they were my tutors. They taught me what this place was all about, how they built it, and what its culture really meant. And when I say they built this institution, they built the modern business school. It didn't exist before the Stanford innovation. So I treasure those memories, and that happened right in my first year. I'll just give you 2 others because I want to let the others speak. Jim Howell was one of those people, and he walked into my office in the first year and he said, "We're going to go broke." and I said, "Could you elaborate?" And so he said, "Look, we get a fairly important batch of revenue from executive education. Let me show you the list of people who were teaching in it." And it had 5 people on it. George was one, and nobody else was on it. And I said, "We're not spring chickens, and we're not going to have an executive program." And that led to a very serious conversation that Garth and I and others had about what's the glide path for a young faculty member to become a full-fledged sort of management education teacher. The last one is this. Bob and Ann, I should say, were very important people to the university, and the school still are. And we realized we needed to build what is now called the Schwab Center. And obviously a major gift came from Chuck and Helen. But the first gift, which was also pretty large, came from Bob and Ann. And so he sat me down and he said, "You probably don't know anything about real estate." And I said, "That's true." And he said, "Well, let me tell you how we're going to do this." And he took me through, essentially a course on real estate finance and negotiating with the university and so on. And at the end he said, "I don't want any recognition." We don't. And I said, "That's okay, but I'll, if you don't mind, write a provision in the contract that says you have a permanent option to change your mind and name something." And after I stepped down, about a decade later, Bob phoned me up and said, "I'm exercising the option." And I said, "That's terrific." And then he did something that just took my breath away. He said, "I'm going to name one of the buildings after you." That's it from me.
You just touched on the value of intergenerational knowledge transfer in this community that we have, and I've been at events here at the GSB when all of you have been present. It's remarkable. So what advice did you have for Dean Joss?
For Dean Joss? I didn't give him any advice whatsoever. He didn't need any advice. He had 2 degrees from Stanford and a brilliant career in finance. So, Bob, do you remember me telling you anything?
Well, you know what he doesn't realize, Mike, is that deans don't play a role in the succession process. It's the search committee, and the search committee had lots of advice.
So, Dean Joss, you were the dean when I graduated, and that was the year of the dot-com crash. Many of my classmates that are here for our 25th reunion actually struggled to find jobs. It was a different environment for us. And then towards the end of your tenure was the global financial crisis. And that one, given your extensive experience in banking, I think you were well equipped to deal with. But you also secured the approval and the funding for this incredible campus we're on now, the Knight Management Center, which is truly remarkable, which opened in 2011. So same question for you. What challenge did you face during your tenure as dean?
Well, you know, I think the biggest challenge in this job, and maybe everyone would agree, is connecting with and bringing together in common cause all the multiple constituents that make up the GSB community. We want our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, our corporate recruiters, the rest of the university, the business community. We want them all to appreciate each other and understand the vital role each one plays. And so we also want the school to be good for all of them, because if it's not, that's a problem. And we want them to understand how it's a team effort in many respects. So, I took the first part of my tenure of just talking and listening, and it was interesting because of all those diverse groups. I'd say the one that was happy were the students. We were in the middle of the dot-com boom, bubble, whatever, and they were looking forward to their prospects, but I would say most of the other groups had concerns and thought we needed to do certain things. So I could see, well, we've got quite a bit to do here. That was the big challenge, and we needed the students to help us do that. They were very helpful when asked, to build the culture of the school in a better way. The faculty came together under Garth's leadership and designed a new curriculum, which was really a great improvement and much better and more challenging. We had alumni, some are in the audience, I'm sure, who helped us get going on leadership and global management. There were 2 areas that they felt we needed more emphasis in. You know, we had new collaborations with the university. We got involved more with the rest of Stanford, with joint degrees, with classes that brought students from the different grad schools together. And that was very effective. We tried to give our staff more responsibility so that they felt not like third-class citizens, but a real important part of the entire effort. So, you know, gave them a sense of purpose, I think, about why they were here. And, you know, finally, the alumni on the advisory council, they pushed us. They said, you know, be bold and raise the money and build a new campus for all these new programs and new changes you're trying to bring about. And of course, that was pretty daunting. But thanks to particularly people like Phil Knight and Bob Bass, amazingly, we did it. And as Roloff said, we had two massive downdrafts in the stock market. The S&P 500 went down 50% in the dot-com crash, and another 50% again in the the global financial crisis. So how we did it, I don't know. I think it's just a testament to the loyalty of our alums to come through even in tough times. So I think that's the challenge, and that was how we tried to meet it.
Thank you. Dean Saloner, you'd been at the GSB for a while. It's a sort of, I guess there's a different dynamic if you've been at a place for a while to become dean versus being an outsider. So you'd been here for a while. You'd obviously lived through both the dot-com and the global financial crises. But you also became dean at a moment of incredible innovation and growth in Silicon Valley with the rise of mobile, the rise of cloud computing, probably similar temptations of students wanting to go and start companies rather than completing their degrees. What is the challenge that you faced?
Well, you know, so first let me say, the first thing you want to do as dean is get your timing right. And following these two guys, I mean, what could hardly go wrong? I mean, think about how Bob had set me up with, you know, he had initiated this, he'd raised the money for it, he had started the construction. I got to finish it and open it. I mean,
yeah, I only got the garage. That's
so that's timing. You know, when I became dean, we were well on our way to being the destination of choice for young men and women who wanted to do an MBA degree. And you know, during the next few years, we accomplished that. And so then the question is, okay, where do you go from there? And the thing that Mike didn't mention is, because he didn't remember, but but when he was dean, I was his associate dean in the mid-90s. And at some point, Mike turned to me and said, you know, we really do need to do more about entrepreneurship. Or something nobody was thinking about. He said, we really need to do something and, you know, go ahead and make it happen. And which is the privilege of being a dean. And I went to Chuck Holloway and Irv Grossbeck, and I asked them to spearhead an initiative in entrepreneurship, and that is how the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies was formed. Now, fast forward to when I was dean, we'd made some progress, but we hadn't really put our foot on the gas, and the reason was this: we were a little ambivalent, actually. I mean, we were unbelievably well positioned. Here we are at Stanford University, we're in Silicon Valley. I mean, what better positioning could you ask for? But we didn't want to be a niche player. We didn't want to become just the graduate school of entrepreneurship. And you know, one day the bloom might be off that rose, and then like some of our competitors, we would have become unimportant and insignificant. So we hesitated, and that was the crucible moment for us. And eventually, we decided to go all in. Not to make entrepreneurship the exclusive path for people coming to the GSB, but to make it the destination of choice for anyone in the world who had an aspiration to be an entrepreneur, alongside the other career paths that you could pursue here. And that's what we did. When I became dean, you could count on the fingers of one hand, and I don't think you needed all the fingers, the number of courses we had in entrepreneurship. Today, we have 50 different courses in entrepreneurship, and that's not double counting sections. If you add sections, that's on top of that. 50 unique courses. Many of those courses are taught collaboratively between a tenure-line faculty member and a practitioner. I've had the incredible privilege of teaching Formation of New Ventures alongside Jim Ellis and Scott Brady, two very distinguished practitioners, and the students get the benefit of hearing, the pointy-headed academic point of view from me, but then what it's really about from Jim and Scott. And I think that's a unique perspective that we can bring to the classroom. We then realized that it wasn't only the people who wanted to be founders who were touched by this, but the people who wanted to be on the other side of the equation as investors, and we developed the Venture Capital Initiative, which Ilya Stribulayev led. And then because globalization was another factor we wanted to take into account, we decided to use what we were doing in entrepreneurship to make progress on the globalization front. So we took a program that we had developed here called Stanford Ignite, which we had developed at the behest of John Hennessy, because there are lots of people on campus who are going to go out as founders and they don't have the business background, and John came to us and said, can you help us with this? And we built a program for that. And we took that program and we took it global. And so we taught that program in Chile and Brazil and China and India and London and France and a bunch of other places. And then Bob and Dottie King came to us and said, we would like to do something about global poverty. And I thought to myself, when you say global poverty, the next word out of your mouth is usually not business school. But we scratched our heads about it, and the conclusion that we came to is that we had the know-how to help founders and managers of small businesses to thrive and grow and become the engines of growth in their economies, and thereby help alleviate poverty. And so we took that on, and SEED was born. SEED has touched more than 8,000 of these folks around the world: East Africa, West Africa, India, China, a bunch of other places, Indonesia. The statistic about SEED that really warms my heart is that if you look at the number of people in these areas whose lives have been touched through employment as a result of what the companies we've been working with have done, I don't want to say we take all the credit for it, but the companies we've been working with have done, that is in excess of 1 million people. So you want to talk about impact, to me, that's just tremendous impact. And so then I want to come back to the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies to close, and I want you to mark your calendars. On May the 13th, we are going to rename the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies for Chuck Holloway and Irv Grousbeck. Very richly deserved.
So I planned to ask all of you what the advice was for your successor, but after what happened earlier, I'm letting go of that question. So Dean Levin, you became dean. You invited me to join the advisory council, and then COVID hit. And my first opportunity to really spend time with Dean Soule was actually on the Beyond COVID task force in those dark days. We also had a budget crisis because executive education in particular really dried up during that period. Was that the hardest test, or was there something else that you encountered in your time as dean?
Well, that was the COVID experience was a very challenging time and mostly because we had to change everything we were doing, and because the interactions that happen on the campus that are really actually the most important thing that happened at the GSB were not the same, and it was an incredible loss. But the school was incredibly adaptive and dynamic. The faculty figured out how to teach. The students figured out how to be social, even though it meant breaking all of the rules in Santa Clara County. And the school actually went on in that period to even though we had to make changes to deal with the budget crisis that you talked about, it actually was a period of sort of great strength and dynamism for the school, because we emerged, I think, stronger and in a better position to recruit for faculty and students against our peers. ended up coming up with new online programs. That was the seeds of the idea to start opening up the school to teach undergraduates. And we started what became the Business Governance Society Initiative that next year will transition under Sarah and Ken Schatz's leadership into a new leadership institute. So we both sort of deepened the excellence of the school and innovated and expanded the school's horizons, which is really the story of the school over many decades. But the thing that came to mind when you were asking the question about a particular moment, a different story came to mind from very early in my tenure. And it came to mind not because it was a sweeping story, but because it just illustrated for me some things, and it was a lesson for me. So very early in my tenure, we had a very surprising thing happen at the school. One of the students got access to all of the 15 years of data on admissions and financial aid, and which had been left in an open drive, and it was a data leak basically. And he wrote a 300-page expose, which he shared with the media, and what he had discovered was that the school was using financial aid to competitively recruit against the other schools, which of course was what all business schools were doing and had done for a long, long time, but people didn't really talk about. And it just caused an incredible crisis. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and reporters were calling, and the students were just enraged. I mean, I can't even tell you. And so I was new. We had a new dean of admissions, Kirsten Moss, and we held this series of town halls. And wow, did we get an earful from the students. It was painful. And we get to the end of this week, we do 3 of these town halls, each one tougher than the last. And I turned to Kirsten and I said, I think we need a new financial aid system. And I said to her, I don't know what it should be, but I can tell you what the criteria it needs to have. It needs to be fair, it needs to be competitive, and it needs to be transparent. And go figure it out, basically. I helped a little more than that. So we enlisted a bunch of alumni to come help. We got a couple of faculty to help. We got the student leaders to come help with that. One of the faculty, Stefanos Zenius, ran a bunch of design thinking sessions for the students from which the ultimate model actually emerged. And the students proposed a particular system, and we weren't sure if it would be competitive, we would be successful in particular recruiting against Harvard. And we got Eddie Lazier, one of the luminous economists on the faculty at the time, to do a statistical analysis, and he said, I think this will work if we can have sufficient resources. And at the end, we rolled it out, and we became the first business school, I think certainly in the country, to have a fully need-based financial aid system. And we didn't know if it would. And we actually didn't know if it would work because we knew we would need to have enough level of support, but we got incredible support from alumni to make sure it was competitive. And in fact, the school's yield and competitiveness went on to record levels in the years to follow. And I actually often think back to that experience because for me, it was a huge lesson about the school and about Stanford and about leadership, actually. That even when you have a moment of sort of crisis and despair and anger and so forth, if you set the right principles and you get a great group of people working on it and you put in the work, often you can turn that into something really spectacular. And to me, many episodes in the GSB have had that characteristic, and it's part of the reason that the school is the best business school in the world today.
I'm sure it's on many people's mind that higher education is under assault in America right now. And given the role that you've played in both leading the GSB, now leading the university at large, do you have any thoughts on the role of academic research for innovation?
I have many. But to keep it brief, what I'll just say is, I mean, the thing that I think is not fully appreciated among our leaders in Washington and generally in the public, and we need to communicate more effectively, is the model that we have at universities of basic research, of science, and of innovation is it is the most powerful engine in this country for economic growth and for ultimately jobs and leadership. And part of that is because innovation within a place like Stanford is the exemplar of that more than anywhere else on the planet. It's just different than the kind of innovation that takes place in other places, like in companies. It's undirected, it's curiosity driven, it spans an incredibly wide range of areas, it's highly interdisciplinary, and it's open, it's just given away so that people could build on it. And as a result, the things that come out of universities are often very long term. So, now everyone is talking about artificial intelligence. The critical moment in AI was a decade or so ago when the deep learning models came out and we sort of saw the power of data and computation. All of the ideas that underpinned that technology, and most of the ones that underpin even the technologies today, came out of academic research decades earlier. Neural networks, backpropagation, gradient descent, all of these techniques and models, they were just sitting around out of NSF-funded research waiting for the arrival of GPUs, by the way, also Stanford. And big data sets, by the way, also Stanford ImageNet, to sort of come together and create this sort of extraordinary explosion that's going to shape the future. And there's just, that is sort of something that academic institutions do in a way that no one else can do, and that's why it's so important to preserve that.
Thank you. I think it's precisely why Silicon Valley is based here too. I remember a statistic I saw recently, it's maybe 40% of venture capital dollars are invested within 5 miles of Stanford campus.
Yeah, thank you, Roland.
No, but it's because it's this marriage of taking these ideas and turning them into reality to benefit society. So, but finally, Dean Soule. So I keep on mispronouncing it. I realized this week that I have been mispronouncing your name for a couple of years, and I'm glad to have been corrected. I was thrilled to learn that you would be the next dean. I had the pleasure of meeting you at advisory council meetings before, and then we had the bonding experience of being on that COVID task force, which is a lot of fun. You're the first scholar. It was actually. I mean, what else do you do at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in the middle of COVID and you're stuck at home? You're the first professor of organizational behavior to lead the school. And when we had the advisory council meeting yesterday, it's actually one of the themes that came up from many of the advisory council members, that the classes that were most influential later in their careers were related to organizational behavior and dealing with people. And so the question I have for you is, given your study of leaders and leadership, how does that influence your approach?
Great, thank you. First of all, as I said yesterday to Roelof, my father-in-law pronounced my last name Soule for over 20 years, so no worries. No worries. And he is actually right when he says we had a good time on that task force. And part of it probably was Friday afternoon. Everybody was looking forward to maybe cooking something nice with some nice wine or something, because that's what we all did during COVID, and it was a good way to get to know Roelof. I could wax on about that forever, but I'll mention just maybe 3 points that I think a lot about, 2 of which are about setting up the team for success, and one of which is about more personal leadership. And when I received the call from John and Jenny asking me if I would take on this role, I was, of course, very, very honored, and standing on the shoulder of these giants is unbelievably amazing. But the first thing that I started to do was think immediately about, who am I going to put on this team? How are we going to complement one another? And I sort of designed it in my head, and the last one, I'm not going to tell you who it was, but the last one, if that person hadn't said yes, I'm not sure it would have been as successful as we've been feeling it is so far. So some of the things that we did together, so first was about team design and thinking about those complementarities and thinking about what we could offer, who had what sort of skill set and so on. But probably even more important was a stylized fact that I thought that probably a good predictor of team success was the amount of time we spent together before we even began. And so we began meeting pretty frequently over the course of months, thinking, planning, discussing. And one of the most important things I think we did was do a values exercise. We talked about our individual values. We talked about where there was convergence. We talked about what our operating principles would be. And we have a document. It's a living document, but we keep going back to it, and we keep referring to it when we have disagreements and when we have heated debates and discussions. We go back to it and recognize that, in fact, that was one of our principles. We will debate and discuss and disagree with each other. In terms of what our values were, I'm going to share them, and because I think it actually will give you an idea about how much we all cherish this school, this institution, and probably also give you an idea of what we're thinking about in the future. So the two values that we converged on were excellence and community. Excellence is obvious, it's Stanford. But we wanted to interrogate the question of, if we look backward in time and look at some decisions that have been made, maybe hastily, were those decisions centered in excellence or not? And so we debated and discussed and thought about what we might do to make sure excellence is always what we're thinking about. The second was, and is, community. If you've heard me speak at any of these wonderful Centennial events, I always talk about the community that this place has given us all, given alums, given faculty, staff, students, and how that's an enduring characteristic and value of what we want to preserve. We have a lot of sub-values, but I'll mention two of them because I think two of them are drivers of excellence and community. One is curiosity. Our faculty, our students, our staff, our alums are at their very best when they're allowed to be curious and to try to satisfy that curiosity by asking good questions and diving into data and debating and discussing with each other. So I sort of see curiosity as a real driver of excellence. And the other is generosity. And, we're sort of at our best when we are generous with our ideas, our time, our energy, our resources, and when we give each other grace, when we disagree with one another. And I see generosity as a real driver of community. So setting up the team and thinking about values and how we are going to derive operating principles from those values, you probably learned this in your organizational behavior classes along the way. Or I hope you did. If you didn't, you just have the Cliff Notes version. And I'll say one thing about personal leadership too. I think a lot about leadership and what being a GSB leader is. And one of them that I focus on a lot is holistic communications. So we have a lot of classes and a lot of training on speaking and executive presence and writing winning articles and a lot of communication, outwardly facing communication. But equally important is listening. We often don't think about that as part of the communication process, and our team has been spending a lot of time listening to the giants who came before us, listening to our students, our alums, our staff, and our colleagues, so that we can act in the best way possible as we head into the next century.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we had the advisory council meeting yesterday, and you had a panel with the senior associate deans, and I had so many members of the advisory council walk up to me afterwards to talk about how palpable the energy was, and it's a manifestation of your leadership, and so we look forward to your deanship. So we're dealing with twin assault on higher education from AI, and sort of questions about whether it's worth going to university at all, certainly also whether it's worth doing an MBA. With all of your history and perspective, what is the future of management education? And is there one? Yes.
Well, let me just say, I think it's about leadership. And The best simple definition I know is from an MIT scholar. He said, you know, leadership is about wanting to do something new and better. AI could be helpful there. And getting others to go along. And I think getting others to come along with you is kind of what the future of management education will have to be. I think that's the part that our humanness is so critical, and you know, AI can't do that. I think. I don't know.
No, I try to stay with the people who are building these things. It's kind of part of my post-deanship life. These are incredibly powerful tools. And so the reaction that we can't use them because they're slightly dangerous is just wrong. But I think, you know, right now, there's a lot of people, especially in the United States, who are afraid of this. And so I can't think of a more important function than business leadership in figuring out how to make this broadly beneficial to communicate effectively about the transition. And so to me, challenges like this augment the importance of Stanford and business education.
So, I mean, I agree with this. I think on the leadership side, actually, we're well positioned. How many of you took touchy-feely when you were here? So something which, you know, our competitors for years have kind of raised their eyebrows about, and a little bit of our secret sauce. We, during curriculum reform, started a course called Leadership Labs, where the students learn how to lead in small groups. So we have doubled down actually on leadership, and we're strong on that side. I think that one of the important trends that we're going to have to grapple with, and that Sarah's going to have to grapple with, is that the demand for the full-time 2-year MBA has been in decline for a very long time. And the reasons are obvious. I mean, you can get some of this in a 1-year program, you can get it in a part-time program, you can increasingly get it online. You're going to increasingly be able to have an AI agent who feeds you a lot of what it is that's our bread and butter. And so we are going to have to think about who is it we should be teaching? We talk about changing lives, organizations, and the world, and if you want to do that, you need to be teaching the people who are going to have the highest impact. Many of them will still be in our full-time 2-year MBA program, but a lot of them are going to be come from other areas and sources.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of those points, and just to pick up on Garth's observation, to me this current period of technological disruption, it's mostly an opportunity for the school, because the skills that the Stanford Business School teaches, that to be able to really think critically about problems, to solve problems, to be a leader, to be ambitious, to set big goals. Those are skills that are going to be in even greater demand in the future. I don't actually worry too much about whether people will want to come to Stanford's 2-year MBA program, because just the opportunity to be on this campus, to walk around, to get exposed to the different people and ideas, you'd be crazy not to take that opportunity. And I mean it. I firmly believe that. And to Garth's point, many more people want that opportunity than we can provide in our short, in our 2-year MBA program, when we walk 500 people across the stage. And so the opportunity for the school to find more ways to reach students, whether it's in the programs Garth was talking about around the world, even on our own campus, they're extraordinary. And I always think you bring people to this school, even if they come for a weekend, and you just sprinkle a little of the pixie dust on them, and they go away and they feel that it changed their lives in many cases. And that is an extraordinary power that we have on this campus here at the GSB.
And I also agree with everything that has been said. However, I want to yes and a couple of things. When I think about what a GSB trained leader is, it is absolutely everything that has been said so far, the kind of personal leadership skills that we provide here and is very much a part of our secret sauce. But I also like to think about the way in which we do an extraordinary job of teaching all of the people who come to us from whichever population, that as a leader, they are embedded in a very complicated context. And that can be the organizational culture, it can be their industry dynamics, it can be their the particular political situation, which might be affecting their businesses, the global political environment. And we teach them, of course, that these are never aligned and that it's not enough to just be aware of what these complicated factors are in the context. They have to both be able to navigate that context with courage, and they need to be inspired to try to change that context when it needs to be changed. And so there's part of what we do here that is, that often we don't talk about that as leadership, but it is something that I feel very deeply that we provide people, and I think that will be what's needed in this particular moment too.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to questions from the audience in a minute. So if you do have a question, start thinking about it. We'll have runners with mics. Before we turn to audience Q&A, I'll give you a choice. There are two questions. Pick one. You can go back as a student right now. Which class would you take? Or which fellow faculty member most shaped your thinking? Why don't we start here?
I'll start. This Centennial has given me time to reflect on one of my favorite colleagues who taught here for many, many years and passed before the pandemic, Jim March. Yeah. He taught a course, which I hope some of you were able to take, good, where he used literature, great literature, to teach leadership, Don Quixote, War and Peace, and a number of others. He told me about it when I first arrived here on campus, and it sounded like a beautiful course. And I talked to some students who took it, one of whom I spoke to last week, who said, I only wish somebody had videotaped all of those lectures because they were transformational. I would have loved to have taken Jim March's class.
I'm going to come at that one from I love that one, Sarah, and I'm going to come at from actually a totally different direction, which is, I came up not through an MBA program, but as a PhD in economics. And when I was studying to be becoming an economist, first at Oxford and then MIT, actually the place that I looked that I aspired to, partly because my advisor, Bengt Holmstrom, who's sitting there in the second row, had been a student here. The people I looked to were the GSB faculty, who had pioneered the fields of game theory and auction design and market design that I went into. And my greatest aspiration in my career was that I would write some papers that they would read and appreciate. And so, I mean this with all seriousness, I never walked into that building a single time without just thinking, I'm so lucky to get to walk into a building with those folks.
So my answer is similar. I was also in the PhD program. And I had come to Stanford to do a PhD in finance, and with the greatest of respect to my finance colleagues, I discovered that finance at the time was a pretty dull area. But what I discovered was that this fellow Bob Wilson, senior colleague, was teaching a course called Multi-Person Decision Theory, which was basically about game theory with asymmetric information applied to a whole variety of contexts, in which we studied, amongst other things, Mike's work on signaling, but a whole variety of topics. And I mean, it just completely blew my mind. And I thought, well, this is something I want to study, and I switched to economics. The great thing was that Bob taught that course every year, and every year the content was different. So I don't know if I took it 3 times or 4 times, but what a gift.
So as a student back in the 60s, I would say the faculty member that had the biggest impact on me was Lee Bach, who was just a giant on our faculty. He taught business, government, and society, which we're back to again now, interestingly. And he taught us how to write really effective position papers, short, pithy, and maybe AI can write them well today, but I really learned from Lee how to write, and it served me well throughout my life. Now, as a faculty member, when I came back, I'd say my colleague Dave Krebs had such a valuable impact for me. He taught me what academic culture is all about and how to operate in an academic culture, which is quite different from a business culture. So David was tremendous.
I've struggled through life without a Stanford degree. So it's a major handicap, I must say. So I'll tell you two stories. The one I remember, they both have to do with alums. And I did want to mention that maybe since I didn't have courses here, there were two alumni who did teach me a lot. One is John Brown, now Lord Brown of Manningley, and he was the chairman of the advisory. And I didn't have any idea what that body was supposed to do, so I needed a tutorial. So John, I wanted to say thank you. And the other one, Dave, was Steve Denning. Steve came to us and said, "You don't seem to know anything about the global economy." And Steve, who eventually became chairman of the trustees at Stanford, had a wonderful way of pushing you but supporting you at the same time. He's just a tremendous gift. Final story. An alum came into my office early on in the 90s. This was after a decade in which the Japanese were so-called eating our lunch in manufacturing. And his advice was, get rid of the entire curriculum and teach total quality management. And I said, thank you very much for the advice. And I thought to myself, that's the fastest way I know to lose my job. Anyway, that's me.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Several. Mics will find their way to you. One over there. Mic's right behind you.
Do you think we will ever have an AI dean for the GSB?
An AI dean.
An AI dean. Will there be an AI dean?
What would an AI dean be?
I think the answer is no. Where's the mic over there?
Hi, Dean Spence. I want to thank you. Many years ago, you and I came from that other place near Cambridge or something, Massachusetts, and I was touring this campus and that place on the other side of the river, and you looked me in the eye and you said, invest in your human capital. And I never forgot that, and it's the reason I'm here today. So I want to thank you for that. And as we talk about the assault on education, I feel like it's in parallel with the assault on humans or human capital. And so I'd like to hear how you all feel about who's going to win. Is it going to be the machines, or is it going to be the humans, and the importance of investing in human capital? Thank you.
No, but everybody will have something to say about it, but I've thought a lot about this. So these things are neither good nor bad by themselves. If you read the Human Development Report, it makes one incredibly important point. This is from last year. It's about AI in the entire world. And it basically says this is a choice. We're not just watching something autonomous take over. And the choices that we make will determine whether people have agency, whether they get sideswiped by the technology and so on. And I think it's a mindset that the business school can help manage. But even in education, right? We don't want, we're being handed a tool that's read everything in every field in every language and understand it at some level. Now, we can't tell people not to use it, but we can teach them how to use it. Don't use it as a substitute for yourself. use it as a research assistant or a tutor or a learning thing. And I think, there's a lot of careful and useful thinking going on in higher education that runs in this direction, and it's a learning curve, but we'll get it right in the end.
I'll just to pick up on that, I'll just say that at Stanford, our major AI institute, which was started in 2017, so it predates all of the LLMs and the ChatGPT and so forth, is named the Human-Centered AI Institute, Stanford HAI, and there was a reason for that, which is that when it started, the visionary founder, Fei-Fei Li from the computer science department said the fundamental challenge of our time with artificial intelligence is going to be how to make sure that rather than having it be substituting for human intelligence, it augments human capability, and that's why we need to focus everything that we do at Stanford around that idea of human-centered innovation and education.
Thanks. A healthy tension always at the school has been, I think President Levin once said this, that it's the only business school in the country that competes both for the best students as well as for the best faculty and best PhD students. And the tension's always been healthy, but it's a tension nonetheless. So in this new age, and as Roloff said, in a time when higher education is under attack, how does the school continue to navigate that tension and that make that a mutually beneficial experience for faculty and students?
I can say a word or two about that. I think about this all the time, so thank you for the question. And part of the answer is every one of you in this room and your colleagues ensuring that you demonstrate with everything you do that this is where people need to come. And I'm talking about students, but for those in the room who are faculty members, that goes in terms of faculty members as well. And so part of it is there. It's you are our ambassadors, and you will continue to send the very best talent to us simply by living the lives that you live in the principled and purposeful way that you do that, and the impact that you have.
Megan Mellon, 2019 MSX. Dean Soule, when your selection got announced, we were all so elated. So thank you for bringing the organizational behavior lens. My question is for the other deans. Dean Soule is prepared to invest in community. In your experience, what is the most powerful asset community can give to the dean to enable them to lead with conviction in times of crisis, such that they become an opportunity? What can the community do to aid the dean? And then last, Dean Soule, what do you need? But I'd love to hear the predecessors first.
It's a great question. For me, it was always, a kind of support. I think Sarah said most of what I believe is right. That is, you have this deeply shared values. And when you have them, then the community becomes, in a sense, your emotional kind of foundation. And so I think Sarah's absolutely right to focus on it.
I mean, I would say grace. A lot of what we do, a lot of what Sarah will do, will get met with mixed reaction. And what I ask of the community is to pause and interact with that conflict with grace. That's what has defined our community. That's what makes our community great. It's not that we expect people not to disagree with what they're seeing and what we're doing, but to engage with us and the people they interact with in a positive, constructive way.
Couldn't say better than these three.
I think that was beautifully, beautifully said. And when Roloff didn't ask me the crucible question, and if he had, I would have said, well, it's just kind of staying awake as I've, been riding this incredible wave of the Centennial, and that means engaging with people who perhaps haven't been engaged with the school for a long time, and pulling people back in and trying to build that community, because we will need it, and not just the business school, but as I continue to work with President Levin and Provost Martinez and the team, we'll need it.
So I'm profoundly grateful for what I've received from Stanford in education, and how I've had the opportunities to go out and share what I've learned in the world. But I'm also wondering about the role of Stanford and the business school itself, in that as I see leadership around the world really being under assault, especially human-centered leadership. And so every year, 500 people come in and they get showered with the riches of Stanford Business School. What is it that Stanford Business School as an institution might do totally different from what it's doing now to be a voice for the best of leadership and a light for others to follow?
Want me to take a stab?
Yeah, please.
I actually think this is a really terrific question, and I have a sort of a strong point of view on it, and that is that I think we need to be more precise about what we mean by the Stanford GSB leadership model. And I kind of hinted a little bit at this, because many of us go immediately to the very important personal leadership skills, EQ, and so on. But I think what we do is much more holistic than that. And I think by better defining what we mean by leadership and what we give people, what we try to train people and teach people to enact as they go on to become leaders of unbelievable institutions, I think we need to be more articulate about that, and I'm planning on doing that. And I can
have a lot of alumni support.
Good. Yeah. Good.
We have time for one more question. Whoever has the mic.
Yes, I want to ask a question about the attack on research and the challenges faced there. So I know that, and this is both for the deans and then Roloff, also you've each led through different political climates, and now we're facing a time whereby there's an attack on the funding to be able to support that research that allows places like Stanford to be so influential. So what's your hypothesis on and view on how Stanford should respond and try to maintain its sovereignty, as well as maintain, to ensure that it's best positioned to continue to be impactful for generations to come?
Have you thought about this?
I think this is a question for the president.
The president, right? I think that's a John question.
I mean, I think you're asking the sort of fundamental question facing universities right now, and of course it's a central question for the next century of American higher education. And to me, the answer to that is American universities play a very distinctive role in this country. We are the source of ideas. We are the place that educates young people to go on to hopefully lives of meaning and purpose. We have, at our best, we have high standards for excellence and for merit, just like Sarah was talking about. We open up opportunity for all sorts of people. Stanford is an elite institution in the sense that people go on to be excellent, but the people who come here are not necessarily elite. People come here from all over the world and from all different backgrounds, and they get the opportunity to excel and succeed and go on to great careers. And we are successful for many, many years in this country, largely because of the freedom that we accord to the people on this campus to question orthodoxy, to come up with new ideas, to challenge each other, and whatever the existing wisdom is, and because of the freedom as institutions that we've been granted in this country to pursue different agendas, different ways of going at things, different models, innovations, creativity. And that has been an incredible record of success. And so now we're in a period where we're being questioned, we're being challenged. We have to take those seriously. We have to do reflection. We have to improve the things that can be improved. There are many of those things. And, but we can't completely get bogged down in that. We have to remember that we do have an important purpose that we serve in the country and in the world, and we have to commit ourselves to the values that underpin that and move forward. And I'm very confident that universities will get through this period of political turmoil, and we will go on to great success and continue or reinvigorate the admiration that people in the world hold for America's leading institutions.
So there are a bunch of zeros flashing up there, which means we're out of time, which is unfortunate because I could sit and listen to our deans all day long. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone.